So what we are going to do over the next 90 minutes is going to be a ride. Brace yourself. Okay. So the first ground, I don't call it a code of conduct. I call it a code of creativity, because I feel that it's, the basics are there, but we need to go one notch up to be able to feel creatively free. What we need is a pen and a paper. Do all of you have that? Or just, quickly grab a pen and a paper, please. Sure. Yes. Let all of us be on mute while, the workshop is on, and then I will unmute each one of you or ask out to each one of you, and then we can take turns to unmute ourselves, speak, and then go on mute. That will just keep the flow and, the overall aesthetics, the verbal and vocal aesthetics in place. I think the most important ingredient of creativity or any kind of authentic expression through whatever format comes from a sense of emotional safety. Because if we are in a space where there is a bit of contention, there is a bit of blaming, or there is a bit of what will people think, we get defensive. I get defensive. I can speak for myself. And that is not the time when I am my creative best. That is the time when I'm on a freeze or flight or, fight mode. So what I always try to ensure at the beginning of each one of my sessions at Lighthouse is to confirm and to bring all our positive energy together and to tell ourselves and to each other, we are safe. No one is going to quote us outside this. No one is going to do anything that comes in the way of my open, creative, open heart expression. I'm absolutely safe. I can make things, I can break things, and it will all be fine. And of course, associated with that is goodwill. I mean, I know that it is there in each one of your heart, which is why we are all here together. And there's a reason we all are here together. It is very important for us to maintain that as a priority. Goodwill, positivity, inspiration, being a catalyst in each other's way, and not creating any kind of chaos or confusion in ourselves or in others, just to lay the space open like a sky so that each one of us can soar. So I just wanted to lay that ground for the session, this session, and for anything that we do at Lighthouse as well. I think emotional safety sits at the heart of anything I do. I don't want to create any chaos or confusion in anybody's life, nor mine. And so is it for the workshop. So first, before we do anything else, let's grab our pen and paper and uncap our pens and put it on the paper. At this point, let's take a moment to think of, any child or children that might be in our family, around somebody who we might have seen. Have you ever wondered what makes children just so incorrigibly happy? They're just so happy. I have a 9-year-old, and I at times really, and especially now during the lockdown, I at times really stop and think, I feel jealous of her. She's just so happy all the time. It's like you scold her, and the next moment, she is singing a song. And I stop and wonder, what is it in us grown-ups that stops us from seeing the same joy while being in the same space, in the same ecosystem? And it is, one of my suspicions that it is perhaps that lack of joy, or that even permission of being able to access that joy, that stops us from being ourselves, that stops us from being our best selves, or putting our best foot forward, because at times we just get boggled with the critical side of things and not the creative side of things. So today what we are going to do is, and of course today I don't have your physical presence to be able to lend you some kinetic sand, or to be able to lend you some crayons or color papers or a pair of scissors or glue sticks, but I know that you at least have a pen and a paper, and your pen is uncapped and put on the paper. And over the next few seconds, few minutes, we will go through a quick process in which I will be giving you some questions that you will put down answers to. There's one condition: you cannot lift your pen up from your paper. So you have to just go on writing until I say stop, and then I bring in the next question, and then you start writing. I'll be asking you 5 questions, and whatever comes to mind, you don't have to say those answers. Those answers are yours to keep. So no privacy issues, nothing, but you will have to write down the answers without giving them second thoughts. Are we game? Okay. So now the first question. Complete the sentence. I am. Who are you? What are you? What are you right now? Professionally, personally, internally, socially. Who and what are you? I am. Everything that comes to your mind. Anything. Okay. What do you love? Finish the sentence. I love. What do you love to do? What do you love to eat? What do you love to see? What do you love to be? What would you love to become? How do you love to spend your time? Where would you love to be? Anything that you have not till now allowed yourself, but you would love to do. Anything, really, anything. And what is it that you loathe? You just don't like. It doesn't matter if you are supposed to do it as duty. It doesn't matter if you are supposed to like it or not supposed to say it. Nobody is going to see what you write right now. You can tear it up and you can burn it. You can just throw it away. But just openly, honestly, transparently, what do you loathe? What do you absolutely dislike? What do you own? What is yours? What is absolutely yours? Your name, your money, your fame, your cars, your house, your identity, your sense of self, your job, your skills, your thoughts, your inspirations, your actions, your imaginations, your moment, your time, your sky, your universe, your earth, your share of earth. What is it you own? What is yours? What do you have? What are your resources? What do you have to offer? What do you have to put on the table? And finally, what do you wish? What do you wish you were? What do you wish the society was? What do you wish the people were? What do you wish the earth was? What do you wish the times are? What do you wish for 2021? What do you wish for people who surround you? People you like, people you don't like, people who harass you, people who support you, people who stand up for you, people who have your back, people who do not have your back, people who are on your way. people who form your everyday, people who you travel with, people who you work with, the person that you are, what do you wish for yourself? And okay. So yes, pens down. May I ask any of you if you would want to raise your hand or unmute yourselves and share some of your thoughts? How did this go for you? Vibhu, if I may
Yeah,
ask.
Sanjay, sure.
Yes.
So I was just thinking around, like since it's a festive time, end of the year, and 2020 has been a completely different year, at least for me personally, considering that a lot of realization happened with the as we were able to spend a lot of time. So there is a lot of you can say inroad into the spiritual part that I have felt over last 6 8 months. That a lot of comparisons running around, a lot of things have to be kind of separated. You don't need to do them, living in the moment and all. So I've spent a lot of time working on self only. So the questions that you asked, it was my answers to all of them were around being grateful and being joyful about it, about life. Like for example, when you ask what do you love, so probably I would say I love life because I love whatever the joys are: eating, traveling, meeting friends, doing whatever I do. In terms of loathing, yeah, the current situation, the issues like pollution of Delhi is a big thing. Some I love Delhi. I'm been born and brought up in Delhi, so that is something I wish it can just go away right away. And what I would wish for the world is that we realize whatever has happened, over last 10, 15, 20, 50 years, and we all move towards certain purposes and become more, you can say, self-aware and realize where we want to move ahead. So these are a few things which came to my mind when you asked these 5 questions.
Lovely. Hang on with that word of self-awareness and self-realization. And I'm so glad to hear about how how it brought you closer, perhaps, if I can put words in your mouth in terms
Yeah,
of how you spend this time. Yes,
say that.
it did. This time, I do believe that it was a huge reckoning, and the first question it asked is, what do you need and what do you want?
Yeah,
And we realize that we are sitting on our wants and we need only a few of it.
true.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks.
If I may ask another person, maybe Anand, we haven't heard from you. If you are there and if you have, answered these questions, may I ask you to unmute? Hi,
Yeah,
Anand.
sure.
Yes.
So I was basically going around the very
Anand, your
idea
voice is a
of
little, Anand, your voice is a little disturbed. I think it's,
relationships and basically the burnout because I will probably switch off my video so it will work
right.
better, I guess. So I was thinking about the
Yes.
relationships and how to manage those and the personal conflicts one have in their own personal lives for several different reasons. So I was thinking around that very particular points.
Right. Makes so much sense. Yes. We can take one more person before we move forward. So anyone, Renu, if you would want to share something.
Yeah, essentially, I guess most of these questions just made me think a lot. Honestly, I couldn't write much, but it's like, okay, these are very fundamental questions, like, which we can ask, and it really helps out and sort out our life, where, right now we just unnecessarily complicate. And if we have the answers to these, are clear enough, I guess that can bring a lot of clarity in life. And I guess, and with clarity definitely comes the happiness, because that brings the peace, just taking out the the clutter from from our heads and thoughts. So yeah, that's what I was just thinking. And
Thank you. That's very comprehensively expressed. Thank you. You nailed it. if you notice, the words we used here is I am, I love, I loathe, I own, and I wish. ALLOW, allow. And what we try to do is we try to allow ourselves to just ask these basic questions and to answer them for ourselves without the red eye of what we should be, what we should love, what we should not love, what we should want or wish, what we own materialistically. I believe that, and especially these current times have changed me personally as much as it might have to each one of you. I do feel that there is this huge requirement to stop and to allow ourselves to be honest to ourselves first, and then to be able to take it out to the world in whatever roles we play, at work, at home, at the dining table conversations, in the living room, and internally, of course. Over and over, through all the employment insecurities, to all the professional as well as personal emotional distances we are seeing, there is the statistics I was reading some days back which said that at work we carry about 1/16 of us to the workplace. So what we essentially do is to box ourselves and to say that we are here, we will finish the work, we will write the codes, we will run the codes, we will match the results, we'll go out on Friday nights, booze, come back. But we don't carry our heart as we reach there. We don't carry our heart and our feelings, or we don't admit to it. And what essentially happens is that we are getting the job done, but we are losing the perspective. Or in other words, we are perhaps mistaking our jobs for our careers. So what I'm going to, tell you is how in my life I have discovered, I have spent a large time of my life. I was sharing early on in the session that I am an actuary by profession, and I spent 12 years talking to computers in numbers. And then I had a professional burnout, and then I completely kind of was thrilled to discover I can at all speak or write. And then I got my voice back, and then I reinvented what I was doing in life. And over the last 6 years, I gave myself that opportunity to study everything I could put my hands on to understand my situation. Why did it happen with me? Nobody told me it's going to happen with me. You are supposed to just work, come home and be happy and buy cars and buy your house and have a child and everything else. I was doing what everybody else did. And why did it not work for me? And when I got back my voice, I very actively, it is obviously not one fine day that you wake up and you suddenly have something you didn't have the previous night. It's not like that. It is a messy process of self-discovery. I spent thousands of hours in silent meditation. I am a 5 times Vipassana meditator. I studied psychology. I studied self-determination theory and a number of things to try to understand what's going on. In the process, I wrote a book on urban loneliness and the needs, emotional needs that are unmet. It got made into a film which was screened at Cannes. I got a number of international awards. As I speak to you, I'm 2 TEDx old. So all of those external recognitions aside, what really happened is that I almost stumbled upon a treasure, which is storytelling. I realized that the reason perhaps we are not as happy as we could be is because we don't speak our own truth and we don't tell our raw, honest stories. I mean, I put up on Facebook or Insta the restaurant dinner I had last night, and to fix the light and the colors in that picture and to post a glossy picture, and few of my friends might like it. But on the days I burn my food and I go without dinner, or I'm just not feeling like eating, I don't go and say that, I burnt my food last night. But I know that if any of you would do that, I would be perhaps the first person to say, me too. And it is that human connection that can bring back everything that we think we have lost as adults. But where does this storytelling take us, or where does this storytelling even begin? So I wanted to, put up this picture and to tell you how stories perhaps were discovered even before human discovered language. So we can perhaps imagine our, foremothers and forefathers in the caves, hunters and gatherers who would go out in the jungle and hunt wild animals and come back, and they might have just about discovered how to light a fire. And every evening they would light a fire with the firewood, and they would gather around that fire, and they would just, with their grunts, maybe not even language, they would express that, don't go to that jungle because there is a tiger or there is a wild animal, and go to that space because there is a, honeybee there. And now archaeologists tell us that, those cave stick drawings as to what kind of animals were there. It is documentation, it is history, it is story. And it is through those pale, faded out stick figures maybe that these ancestors are speaking to us today over time, over these thousands of years of time. So stories really date back to the time, perhaps even before human civilization. People have their own ways to tell stories. In fact, animals have their own ways to tell stories. It is said scientifically that ants, they exchange chemicals in their head, which is how they can transmit the warning that it's going to rain and let's go out and look out for shelter and let's find some space high up. As babies, it is again, biologically proved, and many of you would, reckon with it, that babies can hear inside the womb. And all the things we even tell our little toddlers before they can, speak language is, don't go there, there's fire, you will burn your hand. If you study hard, you will become something. If you eat well, you will become strong. You have to listen to this. You have, that's dangerous. Don't jump, you may fall. So our entire moral, social, sensibilities are developed upon stories. But then we make this common mistake that stories are only for children. And, what do we have to do with stories? We are wise people, we are all grown-ups, and we are busy. But what if stories does not mean a time out from our regular life? What if I tell you that stories are actually our regular life? We don't believe it, we don't see it, we don't think about it, but we are like this broadcasting machines that are giving out stories, and we are like these people who are measuring each other up, judging each other up. Like if I were to meet each one of you physically, like if we were all to be in this room together, I'm sure some of us would like some of us better than some other people. And we would create a kind of kinship with some people and more than somebody else. And that is nothing but our subconscious stories forming a kind of bond. It could be because we are from the same place. Oh, you from Calcutta, I from Calcutta. Oh, you from credit risk, I was also an actuary. It could be because, oh, I know as a mother, you know. It could be anything. But there is this raw, vulnerable human connection that if we get more aware about, if we know how to use it and how to leverage it, not to manipulate, but just to be present, just to present ourselves more authentically, it can not just help us with our personal healing, because I feel that many of us, we are, we have, each one of us, we have suffered from that sense of not being included, not belonging, not feeling like we are welcome in some groups or some point in our time. If we have lived a life so long, I'm sure we have all had our share. But we don't say that. In professional life, and especially now in these times of 2008 or now 2020, we have seen how professional insecurity works. And if we have some skills that are transferable, that make us individuals, that make us a person branded, that I know my work. Okay, this is the company I work for today. But that's not my identity. My identity is I am, and it is my career and my work, not my exact designation at my job. It gives us a sense of self, and it gives us a sense of confidence that we can carry around with us. And of course, if any of us own a business, we know that our why sits at the heart of everything. People don't care, what you do until they know why you do it. So very rightly, the director of London School of Economics, Dame Minur Shafiq, so he said once that in the past, jobs were about muscles. It was the industrial age time where humans were working alongside machines, and the business owners were deciding whether to purchase a machine which costs a certain amount of money and needs a certain maintenance, or whether to hire some humans who can do the same manual job alongside machine. So it was actually a substitute process. There was no need of any thoughtfulness, any intellect, any heartfulness. But of course, then we evolved. Machines, we realized that human potential is far more than the physical muscular strength, and the world evolved, science evolved, technology evolved, and at the next, say, in the knowledge age or the technical age, as we say, jobs became a matter of the brain. Who can think faster, who can solve problems critically faster, and who can use the machines to be able to get better return than somebody else, who can write the code, who can crack this problem. But now, think of it in today's time and age, when practically machines can do every single thing that we used to do. I mean, technology is at such a state where machines are even being able to conduct the minutest, the sophisticated of the surgeries, eye surgeries, all by themselves without human intervention. In these times, we are knocking on the age of wisdom. And in these times, the only way left to be human is to be human. We cannot perhaps do numbers better than machines. We can, of course, assist, we can put in our intellect to shape it around, but very soon, 2 times, 3 times we do it, the 4th time it will be automated. The work, the productivity of human can never match up to the productivity of technical work in the machine. And the only way left to be human is to be human. There are statistics, there are a number of studies that confirm this fact that experience is being valued more than achievement. There are studies that confirm that the care industry, the human connection industry, the joy industry is going to boom in the future, because it's not just about doing a job in the Disney, but even if we are doing a job in the bank, it will still be a matter of who is going to influence, who is going to impact, who is going to have the vision for tomorrow. And that can only come with our own authentic individual presence. That can never come with things that has been stamped by our colleges or universities saying that, okay, fine, you are an MBA, so you land this job. You get the door access. But to make a difference, you will still have to have a vision, a leadership, and a communication, and an authenticity, and the capability of an idea that is yours alone. If you think of all the big companies today, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, None of these are coming from business tycoon families with 3 or 4 generations being handed over to their current successors. It's not about that. Each one of these companies were born out of one single idea. Each one of these companies were born out of the garage. And the only thing that made these ideas successful than the other are their ability to show people that vision and to get people to come after them. Many people have ideas, but not all of them can express it, articulate it, and to get that advocacy from the people. And it is only that set apart an Apple or a Microsoft or a Google. They didn't start off as tycoons with 4-story factories. They all started off as one idea. And each one of them are intangible, if you think of it. Each one of them are actually based on things that you cannot hold in 2 hands, but it's more of an idea that can ignite in the lives and in the hearts and in the heads of people. So that is the power of heart. And when we say heart, the way to articulate, to communicate, and to get people in that heartfulness is perhaps our communication, is perhaps our sharings, our human connections, articulations, expressions, and storytelling. So at this point, I wanted to again, stop one more time and to ask you to put your pen on paper one more time. What is, you don't have to, say something like, I would leave my job and to, change the world or to solve the world hunger, or to, none of us, each one of us are big enough to perhaps at this moment think of an impact which will change the world and its geography. But for yourself, what is it that you would do if you weren't afraid? What would it be? It could be something as simple as taking one solo vacation. It could be as simple as doing something that others are asking you not to do. It could be something that you just think, you have stopped yourself from doing because you wondered what will people think. Afraid of anything, Prathamesh, afraid of anything. What is it that you would do if you were not afraid? Anything. It could be bungee jumping. It could be cliff jumping. It could be taking a day off from work if you weren't afraid of your manager. It could be anything. I want you to come up with just one word. One word. And now in the next page, what I want you to please do is put that one word in the center of the page and draw a circle around it. And to draw a word web around it, by which I mean that you just put random ideas, thoughts, not even full grammatically correct sentences, but really anything that comes to mind. So if for me, it would be like, I would want to go on a solo vacation if I weren't afraid of what my parents would say. Oh my God, how can you leave your child and go on a solo vacation? How selfish of you. If I didn't have to be afraid of that, I would go on a solo vacation. Where would I go? What would I do? What would that mean to me? Whatever is related, unrelated, whatever comes to your mind, just fill up that page with words, phrases, whatever comes to your mind. Just fill up that page without giving yourself a chance to think second time on each one of them. Nobody is going to see that. So we have 30 more seconds to do that. Just put in anything that comes to your mind that you would do if you were not afraid. Anything, just push yourself a little harder. Nobody is going to see it. What would you do? At times I feel like just leaving everything and just going away. Draw some cash and put it in a handbag and going away. If it is anything that resonates with any of you, put that down. If it means ordering yourself a dinner that's too expensive, put that down. What would you do if you weren't afraid? Okay. You don't have to tell me your answers, but anybody would want to share anything at this point about how you felt about how you can use communication in your personal or professional world, how it helps to be authentic, or how you have seen any difference in your life when you told your true stories. Anyone, if you would unmute yourself and Vishnu Vardhan, if you are there, would love to hear from you. Hello, Vishnu Vardhan. Okay, Shruti, if you want to share a little bit.
Hi, Sinjini, I just lost you for about a minute or so after finishing the word web. So what did you ask right now? I lost you on that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So what I asked is that you don't have to share answers that you don't want to share, but I wanted to ask you if this exercise meant anything to you, and if you have used, authentic communication, authentic storytelling ever in your, day-to-day professional or personal life.
Yeah, see, a lot of times, when the purview of not to do or not to do, to not do is
Right.
not there. I guess a lot of us, are more willingly able to connect with what we really would do in any situation, right? And most of the times, even if we do, and whatever the reactions or the results of it, sometimes the results are not very great because you have anyway, like you said, gone out of the way, not bothering about what anybody would say or judge or do anything about. All right, so the
Okay.
reactions may not be very positive, but yes, if you do it and you come back lighter and satisfied, right, and you share it, sometimes I have felt that people feel the ease to connect with you, to know that they too would, and to know that it makes a lot of things much easier than otherwise.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I understand what you're trying to say, that, I have felt that to myself as well, that as long as I went on with the, pretension, if I may say so, that, yeah, it's like this. So how are you? I'm doing well. And the other person says, how are you? And I'm doing well. But the moment you say that, oh my God, my child school, or oh my God, my work pressure, and yesterday night, and I really don't know. And that is when the conversations really begin. Sudha, if I may ask you, maybe 3 words, how this activity made you feel, or if you have been able to use any kind of authentic communication in seeing a difference in your life.
Yeah, Sinjini. Actually, I was thinking about something that I mean, these questions are making me think basically, and try. I am trying to discover a lot of things about myself by doing these exercises, and I realized that there are a lot of things which I can do, which I'm basically maybe procrastinating right now, and and the reason is that I am afraid for doing some of the things, that what people will think, what if I am not able to deliver, and what if they think that I'm not good enough. A lot of those kind of like things comes into my mind when I want to do what I want to do. So yeah, this is helping I think if I discover the pain points, probably then I can discover the solutions as well. Yeah. So thank you.
What you said is golden. I think we worry too much about solutions, but if we define our problems, the solutions are quite easy. I think 90% of the time is to ask the right question.
Yeah.
The answers then come. You are so right. In fact, I was reading something recently which said that a large part of why our education system, and of course our education system, is built on the industrial model. I mean, you have to write longhand answers, 100 marks in 3 hours to be able to score, and your worth is based on how much you have been able to write on that particular day in 3 hours time, and your luck on what questions were asked basis what you studied. A large part of the fault in this entire process, apart from, of course, many other things, like some people can express verbally, some people can express through drawing, some people can express through writing. A large part of the problem is also that the problems or the questions are given and people are asked to write answers. And in life, in real life, forget about owning a business where you definitely have to find the problem. Once you find the problem, the solution can be many and it can always be replaced by one another. Even if you're working in an employment structure in a corporate or in a large business house, you have to find your own problems. It's only perhaps in the first 2-3 years of our corporate lives that we are handed a problem and said that, can you solve this? After that, you have to find the problem. You have to have the eye to spot problems and to be proactive and jump at it and then solve it, and to create a kind of assurance around yourself that I know how to spot opportunities even when it is not broken. And that makes so much difference. So as you said that, I connected it to really, a lot of professional implications. Thank you. So as we understand, communication, of course, is a part of our everyday. There is no doubt about it. We understand it, in whatever way, in whatever we do. As parents, for those of us who are parents, we know how it works. If you don't eat, this guy is going to come and pick you up tomorrow morning, is what makes my daughter eat. These are regular, things. I mean, it is not just about doing the right thing or doing the basic physical thing, but it is also about the stories that we tell ourselves in our head. What are we capable of? What can we do? What will happen? What will people think? What if I don't go? What stories should I tell them? I just don't feel like going, but what excuse should I give? What would happen if I do this? What would not happen if I do this? What, the entire inner dialogue to the entire paradigm of interpersonal relationship, to our family dynamics, parenting, our social exchanges. Hey, how are you doing? A long time. Our social media presence. And not to mention, of course, our careers and our jobs. Another 1 or 2 months from now, and we will all be sitting into the appraisal, in the appraisal meeting, saying what we did, what we did not do, what we could do, what can we do next time. Each one of these, if we think on a superficial level, it could be tagged as negotiation skills. It could be tagged as communication, trying to present ourselves, grooming. But at the heart of it, what is it that makes us connect or disconnect with people? What is it that makes us eat out of somebody's hand as much as we trust them, or to impress somebody as much as to be sure that behind the closed doors they would bang the table in our favor? They would want it for us more than they want it for themselves. And we know that in our personal as well in our professional lives, our logics, our facts, or our analysis only work that much. We can always defensively say that I was supposed to do this, I did this, I also did this, I did this over and above. In that situation, I did this. So what are you blaming me for? But we know it doesn't cut it. We know that we can be safe, we can be protected with logic. But if we want to make a mark, if we want to create an impact, even in our own lives, if we want to share our vulnerability and be seen and be heard as the person that I am, we have to do more. We have to be aware of our communication, the way we present ourselves, the way we talk, the way we connect, the way we listen. You know, for again, a long time, and when I was working in the corporate setup, and my daughter was small, for the longest time, I would, you know, on days that my daughter's school would have a parent teachers meeting or a sports day, I would almost steal out of my office, making sure that nobody sees me. At home, I would have to pretend I don't have a job. At work, I would have to pretend I don't have a baby, because every other colleague, and mostly males, they would not be saying things like my daughter is running a temperature. So I couldn't say that. If I had a menstrual cramp, I would call my boss and say I am running temperature. If I'm not feeling well, if I'm having an anxiety breakdown, I would say, you know, I have a headache, or I twisted my ankle. And now some of us are older and some of us are people managers. And we know that as much as we think we are open, we are transparent, we are human, there are people who are in the place where we were 5 years back. And it is strangely sitting in our culture to be able to not say what is that truth. To be feeling unnecessarily guilty or shameful for things that are perfectly human. What if I say for the first time that, you know what, I really find it very difficult to work on the first day of my period. So, you know, maybe I would take a sick day from next month onwards. And I know for a fact that the first time I open my mouth, the next time, the other girl in the team would open her mouth. And it will form a community, it will form a social empathy. I know that if I say something like, you know, I'm happy to come earlier in the morning, but this is when I have to leave, because there are commitments that I have to have in my personal life. And what if I can stand up and leave, you know, walking through the center part of my hallway and to just walk with my chin up, because I'm as much an employee as much as I am a mother. Or what if I can tell my, you know, society, like, you know, people in the society or on social media or at my child's school, my child's teacher, that, you know what, you are also a working mom because you are coming and teaching in this school, and these are my commitments, and this is what I can do. And please don't, you know, you are not helping by making me feel guilty, but, you know, what can we do to work together? What essentially I'm trying to say is something that, you know, scholars call parallel thinking in psychology. Oftentimes, with whoever we are dealing with, be it people at home, be it people in the work, be it people out in the society, we are looking at the same thing from opposite point of view. It's almost like we are physically positioned on the opposite sides of the table, and we are trying to, you know, pull the thing in our favor. The only way to make this more conducive and to make ourselves creatively and emotionally thrive is to change that perspective and to make both of us come to the same side of the table and to look at the problem like a problem, both wanting to solve it, so that it gets solved not for this one time. It's not a win or lose. It's not a zero-sum game that if I win, you lose, or you win, I lose. But it is to look at the problem as that external factor. And it can only happen when we are raw and honest, and when we say that, okay, fine. So this is the issue and this is the person, and we separate the issue and the person, and we bring in our creativity, we bring in our analytics, but we create that conducive communication, that conscious communication where nobody is nobody's enemy. We are all here to solve the problem, and if we look at it from the same angle, we see the same thing. It's almost like, there's a house which has 2 windows on one side and 1 door on the other side and a garden on another side, and 4 of us go and 4 of us stand on 4 sides of the house and we describe the house differently. Or the way we, a blind man sees an elephant where, he touches the trunk and says the elephant is the trunk, and touches the skin and says that the elephant is a, rough skin. What can we do to see the whole elephant? What can we do to see the house from the same angle and to describe it in the same way? What can we do to get conscious in our everyday communication? The communication, as much as we use it in our everyday, is essentially an art form. It is an art form because it is not pure science. It is not like you put, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen and it will become H2O. It is not that. It is a lot to do with personal recipe and personal ingredient. And there's a whole lot of tools and techniques that are not taught as a part of our regular education system, but they become very important in the way we live our lives, in the way we are successful, in the way we are happy, in the way we talk to ourselves in the quiet times inside our head. So I just, tried to bring in a few the rules, or just to give you a glimpse of the tools and techniques that we use that can help us to become better communicators. There's, of course, the first one, as I call it, is a Veni Vidi Vici, which is you come, you see, and you conquer. Now, when we all come, like right now, if all of us were to be seated in one room and we have come to this room, but what we see is very different. Some of us might be looking at the horizon. Some of us might be checking out the paint on the wall of the room. Some of us might be thinking, okay, fine, there are books behind us. So which book do I? So what do we see? When we come, what do we see? And what do we want to conquer? What is our purpose? What is our objective? What are we trying to do with it? So communication essentially is a whole brain thing. It's neither right brain nor wrong, not the left brain. It is about imagination, engaging, opening ourselves up to weird possibilities. If you did the word web exercise honestly, you know that some of the solutions are not within any kind of logic. But if you weren't afraid, you would still want to, put that in. And then you look at it and then you see, what is it in this that makes sense? And then you rationalize, then you balance, then you spot the purpose, and then you ask the right question, as Sudha said, and then you find the answer. If again, any of you have read this book called I Am Okay, You Are Okay, there is this, lovely analogy which says that we have 3 voices in our head: a child, a parent, and an adult. So the child is somebody who is always asking, I want more screen time. I want to play games. I want to have chocolate. I don't want to get up in the morning. I want. And then there's this parent which says, no screen time, no nothing, go study all the time, no play. And then comes the rational adult, which says, okay, fine. So here is the routine: 1 hour of screen time, 2 hours of studying. You have to solve the maths problem. If you have got it wrong, you have to attempt it again. And then you can order in once a week. And so that's the balance that we are looking for. But what we are essentially doing is becoming that parent in our head. No. The other thing that, that helps is how to structure what we want to say. Because many of us have ideas, right? Many of us think of new things all the time. But why is it that some ideas get wings and some get stuck to the ground? There is a way of being able to deliver that. There is a reason why when maybe Subhash Bose said, give me blood, I give you freedom. Or when, Martin Luther King said that, I have a dream. Or when Gandhiji said, the Salt March, there must be a reason. Or when Steve Jobs said, or even when Hitler said, or whoever is without any kind of prejudice or judgment of what is, what is right, what is wrong, what were the villains or heroes, whatever they said, there is something, there is this method behind that madness that makes people go with you, with your vision, to make it your own vision. It is not often the highest paid employee who is the most bought into the vision of the company. It is perhaps one of those who understand, who adopts. So there is this famous three mason story that, three people toiling out and breaking bricks on the ground, and a tourist goes and says, what are you doing? And the first mason said, what else? You can see, I'm toiling so hard, it's sun out there, I'm breaking sweat, and life is so difficult. And the second one says, oh, but I'm doing it for a good reason, because, I have mouths to feed at home, and I have, 4 children and my wife, and I am doing this so that I can earn my day's earnings, and I can do my duty towards my family. And then the third one comes and says that I am helping the Pope build a cathedral so that more people can come and visit the Son of God. So it is the story that we tell ourselves that decide our happiness. There are things that should change in the society. There are things that should totally move in terms of sensitivity, in terms of awareness, in terms of change of policy, change of culture. But it is also true that some of it lies within our purview and some of it is beyond our control. And still what we can do is to tell our stories better inside and outside. So the way we often structure our stories is, in social media, again, for many of us who are present in Facebook or LinkedIn, we consume a lot. Only a few of us are producing, creating. And even if we do, there are ways in which we can connect and there are ways in which we do not connect as much. So there is a certain science and a certain art behind what helps to connect. You start with a hook. It could be humor that breaks the ego barrier and people are laughing with you, so they're on your side. Or there could be a startling fact. Do you know that we are not there present in our own lives 49.7% of our lives? Because 49.7% of our lives, we are either in our head in the past or in the future, thinking of what happened before or wondering what would happen after, and we are not mindful. Or do you know that, our Christmas is not Jesus's original birthday? So some kind of a startling fact, some kind of a statistics, some kind of opening a humor gap, and then to fill it up with connection. Oh, you also from there, I also from there. Some facts, do you know, this year, we have been talking so much about, obviously, our shared fear around how 2020 has been and the number of positive cases. We have all heard those facts, so 3% is the mortality rate. So this is the recovery percentage. These are the number of seats in the hospital. But the moment we hear that friend's mom who got positive, the moment we hear that neighbor who has recovered and come back home after 16 days on the ventilation, that is when your numbers become your emotion. The moment we say, I know somebody who was attempted with plasma therapy and it was successful, and now the government is saying that this many percentage and this many this. So once you get the intensity, the connection, then you put in the facts and then you zoom out and then you show the impact. But would the numbers make as much sense if you did not put in the pathos in it? And of course, stories. How does it matter to you? Why are you saying that? Did it happen to you? Did it happen to somebody you know? How do you relate? And finally, what can I do to help you? If I have been convinced, you have a reason to say that. If I have bought into your story, what can I do about it? What is my CTA, call to action? How can I help you? And there you hammer in the purpose. What are you saying this for? because you want to have the children go out for a holiday, because you want the children to plant more plants, because you want to talk to your society people to be able to, paint the exterior of the wall, whatever small purpose, whatever big life-saving, world-saving purpose, it has to have a conscious communication at the heart of it, and that makes all the difference. Another point, and after that we will hear some of you share your thoughts. When we talk, we bring in our information, we bring in our knowledge. But that is the ethos, that is our credibility. Who are you? Why are you listening to me? Because I have spoken for some time, because I am, a multiple time TEDx speaker, because I get invited to speak on emotional intelligence and gender intelligence, because I am the founder of a house which runs programs in storytelling and authentic storytelling. That's my ethos, that's my credibility, which perhaps gave you the trust or the reason to maybe, try and see how this workshop goes. What is the logic? Do you think that, okay, so if this happens, then that happens. There's a clear analytical step. But neither of it makes as much as an impact as the third one does, pathos. They say that even the most dry, most number oriented, even the addresses at NASA, the announcements, they make sense when it has adequate amount of human connection, when it has the pathos, the feelings. I mean, we have all been in town halls where our CEOs or our CEOs have walked in and said, these are the financials over the last quarter, we have achieved these numbers, and so next month the bonus is going to be announced, etc. And we have all sat back at our chairs and fidgeted and wondered, when the lunch is coming, checking our clocks. And then there have been those leaders who have said, I see you there. I know the times are difficult. I don't have all the answers, but hang on. And we know that when we come back after work and when we think we have switched off, that small little sentence rings in our head and gives us the reason to go back to work tomorrow. If we are not conscious of this, it's very easy to get encumbered into our numbers, into our actions, into our logic. But it is that feeling, that being human, that makes a lot of difference. So at this point, I just wanted to tell you what, where I come from and what, why I am doing what I'm doing. So these are more of the, external identity, CV kind of expression, but really in my heart. So I grew up as somebody who believed in the great Indian myth, which is you study hard and everything in life is going to be a cakewalk. I studied economics from ISI, and then I went on to become an actuary. I was a group leader leading a team of 40 people in my last job. And I'm a qualified associate actuary. And I spoke to computers in numbers for 12 years. And then I had a huge burnout. And the doctor gave the verdict that I was a step away from quadriplegia. So this was 2015. The doctor said that you cannot work. And I'm like, how can I live if I do not work? Because I was grown up. I had the mindset that is my identity and that is the only reason to exist for me. I was working, and that made up for my reason to exist. I had fibromyalgia, I had major depressive disorder, I had huge withdrawal symptoms of wanting to not hang around anymore, frankly. So many dozens of doctors later, many scans and many difficult tests and many months of bed rest later, I discovered my voice. The way I put it, it was not me who picked up the pen, really, the pen picked me up. So since then, over the last 6 years, 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 2020, I have tried to really understand what is it that we are missing out. Because the moment I opened my mouth and told my story and said that I'm burnt out, and as an executive, as a mother, as an urban person with my demographics, while I have a lot and I'm grateful, there is a lot that we can do better, and we are not talking about it. And we are lonely, and we are dressing up and clicking pictures and posting on social media. But I had a huge emotional void in my life, and the moment I opened my mouth, I saw so many other hands go, me too. And that is when my journey of storytelling began. I wrote a book, Elixir. I am a part of multiple anthologies where I wrote a number of different genres: historical fiction, romance, a lot of other genres. I also actively write columns for international publications, Huffington Post, Thrive Global, etc. But really, those are on the outside. What really happened inside me is that I found my voice. And when I found my voice, I realized that I belong to myself. I can draw my boundaries, and I can become more of myself. And whatever I do, if I know my purpose and how it fits into the bigger reason of my why, I'm happier. And for a long time, I was getting invited to teach workshops and master classes and give keynotes. But I also realized over time that these are things that are very impactful. When we hear a good speaker speak, or when we read a good book, it does make a mark. But those influences often have a half-life. I mean, I have been in a number of discourses where I have heard people and I was blown away. And I came home, and in 3 days' time, my life and my thought process fell back to where it was. And then I realized that I need to start a process where I can bring this gift, where I can give it in a way that is more durable and that is more transformative and that can stay and make a difference. So, which is when this year, I launched my own company, Lighthouse. So, I mean, I won't even say we are fully born. Frankly, I was very honored and very ecstatic to be selected among one of the 300, like there were 10,800 applications, and I was among the 300 who were selected to be incubated at IIM Bangalore this year. So if any of you have got the chance to look at the website of Lighthouse, so Lighthouse now has a website. I'll maybe quickly find the link and give it to you. So what I'm trying to do, and what I realize is now my purpose in life, is to be able to help people find that voice, because we are, somehow it is not a part of our regular education system. The companies help us only as much as they want to help us for getting the job done for that job, for that current position, because obviously, we have a huge L&D team in the company, etc. But even then, that opportunity is limited by how much is required then and there at our companies. But that doesn't take care of our overall careers, or that doesn't give us an overall view. And which is when I thought that my work, which was more B2B, which was more to help out the employees of the business, I would also want to open it up to the B2C. At a very obviously, the companies have a different kind of budget. So B2C has a very different model, much lower and much more accessible model. But I believe that once we can do that, it will help us to shape up our careers, not just the job that the employees are sponsoring the skill sets for, which is what brings me to, start mentoring and start sharing my whatever, skills and knowledge I have gathered from multiple diverse subjects of economics, psychology, self-determination theory, what motivates us, and studying fiction, non-fiction, screenplay, expressing ourselves through written words, through spoken words, through stick figures, through creativity of any format. I'm also, I write screenplays for short films. I write columns, I write short stories, I write novels, as I told you. So all of those things put together has given me that, very, I would say, very gratifying mix of seeing how the same skill can become a part of our joy and can become a part of our CV at the same time. So with that, I bring the very reason why we should tell better stories, and why this is going to be so important, and this is perhaps going to be the superpower of tomorrow. So as I was saying, how it is going to be helpful for each one of us. Stories are becoming part of the boardroom conversations. The pie charts and the bar diagrams are really becoming a matter of the past, because they don't speak. You show those numbers, nobody remembers it. But when you tell the story, when you say how it matters, it's like, so last month, the sales figures were such and such, versus imagine this tourist who landed in this city, and so he's trying to find the shop to be able to repair his suitcase, and he tries here and he doesn't, and he tries there, and then he spots this shop and it also gives him a holistic solution. Imagine if we can open this in 300 cities. On an average, the tourism statistics look like this, and this is going to be the revenue. The very same story of numbers can be bundled in a way in which it will make a mark, in which it will create an impact. For each one of us who own their own company, or who are personally influencers, or who are even doing whatever they're doing but want to be a subject matter expert, the way they can use storytelling for their own authentic connection and branding, the way they can tell their company stories, because essentially when we speak about ventures, it's easy to get locked into a situation where I think that, so I'm going to offer this and this is going to make a huge difference. But I'm not the hero in this story. I'm not the heroine in this story. The hero or the heroine is really you. If today we are doing this workshop, the hero and the heroines of the workshops are you. And what is that story that speaks to any of us? If I'm going to sell a money plant, can I say that, a bit of green every day when you wake up and it's sitting on the side of your bedside table? And have you thought of nature and how do you relate to plants? And have you ever wondered how this entire world of, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom work? And to have that little souvenir of nature sit beside you, watch over your sleep and your dreams. And imagine what that can do versus laying out 10 money plant from competitors and say that this is priced at 8 rupees and this is priced at 12 rupees and ours is better because there is this fertilizer in it. Careers, again, especially, even if we are in our mid careers, I mean, there's so much that we can have just by being able to tell our stories more effectively. I mean, after a point in career, frankly, it's very difficult to quantify how much you have done. And what really decides our hiring and promotion for the next job or for the next opportunity is how many people love us. People who are decision makers, who are sitting in the closed door and, going through the names of candidates and taking sides. And that connection, that love, we used to call it networking, but frankly, networking is very, very limited. What really matters is who wants us to win. And that happens when we connect. And how do we connect with our heart? By use of communication. Our social presence, our family presence, our conversations are personal. Who am I? What do I want to do? What do I want to become? Our parenting journeys, and of course, our internal journeys. What is it I'm telling myself? I'm not good enough. I'm not ready enough. I'm not sufficient enough. Do I love myself enough? What do I tell myself when I see myself in the mirror every morning? what makes me happy, what gives me permission for joy. Each one of these are weaved around our communication that we are unaware of. So any thoughts at this point? I have been speaking for a while. So anybody who has not spoken till now? Letatsi, if I may ask you, a few thoughts around how you have used communication in your personal or professional.
Thank you for that. I think I'm one of those that's been struggling with communication, but I did find this workshop quite helpful. And I think earlier you made an example of how multinationals started in garages and they were able to sell their idea by just communicating the idea. And as you were getting there, I asked myself, how does one get there? But I really like the fact that at a later stage you mentioned how important the human connection is, when we communicate, and that's sort of what I'm taking out of this, and something that I will try in my day-to-day life. But I've really enjoyed the workshop.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone? Paromita, I can see Paromita. If you would want to share how, if you are taking something out of this and how you have used communication in your personal, professional.
Hi, Shinjini. Thank you so much. Well, I am a communications professional, so it's fascinating for me to watch how people communicate or they fail to. I'm fascinated by non-verbal communication as well, which is a lot about body language, which is a lot about tone of voice. And now with the onset of everything online, it's the pauses that people take, it's the slight nuances that define what you are saying. But I think it's fascinating you are doing what you are doing, because this is such an underrated skill, life skill, and it prepares you for whichever profession you want to take. So I think that is amazing. Every one of us, each and every one of us is a storyteller, but not everyone is good at it. So what I like in what you're doing and why I think Lighthouse differentiates itself is because you are equipping, empowering people with skills that they take in wherever they go. It's kind of not going to be like the algebra that my teacher taught me to do and then I never used in my life. So thank you for this initiative and best of luck going forward.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your sharing, because yes, I mean, it's so easy to overlook this piece in our entire jigsaw puzzle of life. So let me just quickly give you 3 ways in which I feel that, communication and creativity. I mean, communication perhaps sounds a little dry, but what essentially we are doing is being ourselves creatively and giving ourselves creative permission. I feel the first way in which communication and creativity wins the war for me is that it doesn't follow the zero-sum game approach. Like, it's not something that if I use today, I don't have tomorrow. In fact, the more you use it, the more you have it. The more you grow the muscles. It's an unlimited reserve. And as much as you learn to do it better, you cannot go wrong. I feel that is one of the things which sets art apart from analysis or science, that, we can really use it as much. It's not that if somebody feels connected to me, I have exhausted my reserves. I can make everybody feel connected to me. I can make everybody follow me. And I can make everybody bang that table behind my, for me, behind my back. The other thing about communication, which again is something that at times are, what I experienced as in my corporate career is that I have been given, skills development, L&D, which are often bound to the job that I'm doing in hand. However, communication is one thing that I can carry with me outside the office doors into home, from home into office, in the same company, if I change department, in the same job, if I change my level, if I change my job. So this is something that is so transferable that it can only help us carry our collected skills. And that is fascinating because so far I have been in companies where they have used internal softwares, where they have used internal systems, and where the jargons are so internal that it takes about 6 months to even adapt to a new job or to go even within the company to another department. And that is where I felt that being able to speak the human language and to do it better and consciously wins the war for me. And finally, the third thing I wanted to share is the person who is going to be your competition, who would be running the race ahead of you in the horse race or rat race that we run, or we are told we are run in our lives, is you, the person that you see in that mirror. The only person who you want to be is a better you. Because communication is something that gets people on your side. It's not when I ask any of you, and what is your story? What was your childhood like? You would perhaps tell me about the tree you climbed as a child, and I would tell you about the tree I climbed as a child, and we would feel one. But instead, if I were to ask you, what is the car you drive and what is the car I drive, I would be like, oh, so when the lockdown lifts, I will upgrade my car, or I need to buy the next edition of the iPhone. But communication is something that endears us. Communication is something that brings us closer. So not only it helps us become successful, but it helps us become successful in a way that is not clean on our conscience, but actually thriving and creative on our conscience. And that is something that is almost, sitting there in front of our eyes, in front of the bare eyes, as a reserve that we are not tapping upon. So I wanted to, just pause at this point. Again, we have mostly heard from all of you, but ask yourself, what is it you want to do with your one wild and precious life? And ask yourself how, being aware that to be able to speak better, to be able to write better, to be able to write that email better. Hi dear, can you send me that file? Yes, I am doing that. Even that can be enriched with chosen words, with lessons, with techniques, with heartfulness that can make people be on your side. And whatever you do with your one wild and precious life, this storytelling, this authenticity, this raw, vulnerable human presence, and this willingness to be open, to open your heart, can perhaps bring a gift to you that you have not tapped on till now. So we are almost at the verge of time. We are actually dot at 12:30. And I wanted to take this opportunity to very quickly introduce you to something that I do at Lighthouse. It is really, as I was telling you already, in 2015, when I was kind of broken down, and I was in pieces in myself. I didn't know that there can be any life for me if I was not working in my corporate job and having that SMS hit my phone at the end of the month saying the amount has been deposited in my account. So that is around the time I rediscovered my entire sense of self. And I also realized that we don't have forever to make a mark. I mean, after retirement, I will take that holiday. No. So we have to deal with it now. And a large part of dealing with it was about discovering that I have a voice, empowering my journey or my sense of what I am here to do in this one life, to accelerate that journey with the use of my voice and the use of my creative joy, to give myself permission to experience my life and then to see where it goes, to experience the journey as much as the destination. And then to create a legacy with it, to create a message so that hopefully someday we would not be around, but there would be a message that we would stand for beyond the homes that I may leave for my child, or beyond the job I might have done, which has been replaced with somebody else. So how I help people to do that is I teach programs. I, of course, do these kind of complimentary workshops where I try to touch as many lives and try to be able to give them the taste of what I am even talking about. Because once I discovered it myself, I feel so excited, and it's like, oh my God, it's lying out there in the open, and why don't more people talk about it? So that really gives me motivation to talk about it. And then for people who are ready to make that investment to bring that difference in their lives, because it is fantastic. It really is a non-ending reserve. And we are ready at certain points in our lives more than at other times to imbibe and to make that investment and to do that. Because as I said, our keynotes and our workshops have a half-life. When we have to make a difference, we have to create the tools and the muscles for it. That can only happen with a bit of, with some kind of conscious learning. So what I essentially do is in this workshop, it is actually a 8-part, 16 hours session, which runs over 22 days. So the next time I'm doing it is starting 6th of January. So twice a week, 2 hours each session, I go through one big part of what we are talking about. The first one is, of course, the creative abundance, to understand and to discover and to find our voice. In this, we talk a lot about the multiple ways of thinking, the 6 thinking hats, the different color codes of emotion, and also the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell, where we essentially are each one of us trying to be our own hero who triumphs over hurdles and wins the pot of elixir. And we also help our people, our manager, our reportees, our people at home, the customers we are serving. If we own a business, what are we doing to be able to help them in their hero's journey? And in the second session, we talk about structure. What is the method behind that madness? What happens in the green room? What happens on the other side of your embroidery? And how we can work around the structure and the composition of our creativity to be able to give it the correct shape and to be able to get the attention of the people whose attention we want. In the third section, we talk about creative writing and the techniques and the secret sauce and how to make your characters, how to make your settings, how to write emotions, how to talk emotions. Like I love, there's this saying by Ernest Hemingway, which I'm reminded of, which says that don't tell me it's night, show me the glint of moonlight on the broken shard of glass. So you don't say that I'm angry. You say that his nose flared and his hands and palms started to sweat. And then the voice trembled. And she was scared, but you don't say she was scared. You say that, she started and then she stopped. And her hands started to tremble. And then comes the fourth part, which is how to work your voice. If you're going to be in a one-to-one conversation, if you're going to be in a Zoom meeting, if you're going to be in a YouTube video, if you're going to be in a panel discussion, if you're going to become your subject matter expert in whatever job you do. And once you become that, what essentially happens is, I won't say that job security is something that is fixed and somebody can give a certificate for it, but once you become known for the work you do, you automatically have that confidence that one, you are more valued in your current job. And if you were to look at a change of job, given change of your own heart or your company's heart or whatever, you have that prepared ground. And to be able to create your subject matter expertise, you can use content, be it video content, be it podcast, be it your written words, be it your spoken words, and how you use your voice. Just as Paramita also said, right now what I'm doing is, you can see, I'm putting in information in a certain speed, and then I'm changing the speed of my voice to be able to help you absorb it, to be able to give you those timely pauses, to be able to take out the fillers from my speeches so that my clarity reaches you. The other part is a large part, which is the body and the mind. We oftentimes make the huge mistake of trying to imbibe, too much of drama, or to, throw our hands and to say 1, 2, 3. How to use the right recipes and the right ingredients in the right proportion to make the dish you want to make. With your speech, with your written words, with your expressions, with your PowerPoint slides. What is the body, mind, the physique, and the emotion of your communication? And then on the 6th day, we talk about audience and the connect. Because at the end of the day, whatever we do, it is about what they see. It is about what they feel. It is about how it even matters to them. Nowadays, they say that our attention has actually come down to 8.13 seconds because of, so many ingredients and, the problem of plenty. What does it take for somebody to not go back to checking their WhatsApp message on mobile while you are talking? What does it take for somebody to pay attention to you? What does it make, what is it that makes somebody to open their purse strings to you? What is it somebody needs to be assured of, to trust you, to be able to eat out of your hand, to be able to bang that table behind you, to be able to take your side even when you are not in the room? And again, a lot of the things we are talking about is perhaps one-way communication where you get a chance and then you talk, and you have been given that platform or that pedestal. But how do you make your entry in a conversation? How do you make your presence felt in a group of people? How do you communicate for empathy and influence? And how do you get a share of the combined joint attention while not trying to be overbearing, while not trying to be a nuisance, or while not trying to be, fighting for attention? What can you bring to a group discussion? What can you bring to a conversation? What can you do in a joint group meeting to make your mark? And finally, the 8th session is always, something that we eagerly look forward to, which teaches us the impact, legacy, and the joy. Because if we are not having fun, nobody is having fun. What can we do to combine joy with success? Because oftentimes now, as we think, we say we work hard and party harder, as if these are two different compartments. If you work hard, you are struggling and suffering. And when you come home, you kind of, either booze or let loose or go to catch up a, light movie. But does joy have to be different from success? Does joy or internal work have to be different from professional work? What if we could stream them and mainstream them together with good communication? So this is what I teach. I'm going to start my next session in January, starting 6th January, going up to 29th of January, which is exactly around 21, 22 days. And as they say that, you need a practice 21 days at a row to be able to make it a part of your practice and your habit and your character. So in the interest of time, I'll, quickly browse through these couple of slides, which I thought I would have time, but we have spoken a lot already. Interestingly, these are, few participants from my last session. I taught this same program, and 4 of them from 4 different continents this year. So I have been very lucky. And it was also a huge reckoning for me to understand how, even as we were geographically so different and culturally so different, there is this invisible, compassionate, empathetic storyline that ran through all of us. And the community feeling of this group was something that led to a lot of synergic learning. And that always happens. The more we open our mouth about our own individual personal stories we told nobody about, you realize there are more people who are like raising up their invisible hands and saying, me too. So that is something that gives a very endearing sense of community and gives us a sense of belonging. Because at the end of the day, I feel that as much as professional success this preaches, it is that loneliness that it elevates that, that helps me connect with my learners and to bring value and to change their lives. So some more things that I'm doing for this session that none of the previous people had actually. In fact, Renu was there at one of my previous programs. She would tell you it was not there. This is something I developed more recently. Is I'm bringing in 3 bonus items. with this session this time. So one is how to change the stage fear, because they say that the fear of public speaking is the #1 fear, more than the fear of death. And how can we work around that? Because unless we are able to deal with that, as much as we know that it's a glossy item sitting on a shop showcase and good to have, but I don't have it. So what stands between us and being able to access that faculty is that fear that we want to work with. And I would talk about some very intrinsic and intensive NLP techniques, some very practical tools, and very different 5 kinds of tools that help us work through that fear, not out of that fear, but we have to work through it to be able to go past it. And that is what I do with Beat the Speaking Blues. The second one is common storytelling mistakes and how to stay safe from them, because at times we make the mistake of something that seems glossy but ends up landing with a thud, and we want to avoid them and not fall in the trap of making those mistakes that can stop us from being the storyteller we want to be. And finally, the secret sauce and the master strokes that make a good story great, something that makes a mark, that something that makes us touch the lives of our audience, and something that makes us meet the purpose we are set out to. So with all of that, so this is a 16 hours intensive with all this, and without the bonus, I actually, this is the cost at which I teach these programs, because these are all absolutely live programs, not recordings. These are really, our live presence and our absolute total, absorption in that process of transformation that really, we do. But of course, I'm not going to, so I have brought it down because you are special, and because it makes, it makes it more accessible for more people. So what I'm going to do is, I've brought it down by a whole amount to bring it down to 10,000 rupees in Indian money. And with 16 hours of live presence and, synergic in-depth learning, and with all the 3 bonuses that I have created over the last 3 months, with a lot of analysis and a lot of in-depth studying. So this is what I wanted to, make you aware of. And if for any of you who are, who see the reason to invest in yourself to be able to grow this muscle of being able to communicate better and see how it is going to change your personal and interpersonal and social and professional, I welcome you to become a part of this program and to make an investment in yourself, and we would have a lot of fun and a lot of transformation together.